All set in terms of being live?
Yep. Yep,
Okay.
everything's live.
All right. We're back on the record, and I'll next take up the matter of Samantha Zeri Butters versus Christopher Winkler, file number 11-050396DS. And present today is Ms. Butters, along with her attorney, Mr. Miller, Mr. Winkler, along with his attorney, Ms. Payne. And we have the witness, Jory Verrett, is also present, and everyone is present by Zoom. This is a continuation of a hearing that today we're taking, moving forward with testimony, I believe, from Ms. Verrett. And with the attorneys, are there any preliminary matters, Mr. Miller?
Judge, just that I thought today's purposes is that, was to hear from the counselor, which is why we have Ms. Verrett here today. And then also that I still reserve the right to be able to call Mr. Winkler to the stand.
All right. And anything preliminary, Ms. Payne?
No, that is my understanding as well, though.
Okay. All right. And so at this time, Mr. Miller, are you calling Ms. Verrett?
I will, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Verrett, if you kindly raise your right hand for me. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Verrett, could you please state your full legal name for the record and spell your last name for the court recorder?
My name's Jory K. Verrett. My last name is spelled Verrette.
And are you employed?
Yes.
And where are you employed?
I am employed at Positive Counseling Center.
All right. And what is your job at Positive Counseling?
I am a therapist there.
All right. And are you familiar with any of the parties that appear on the screen before you today?
Yes.
All right. Who are you familiar with?
Miss Samantha.
All right. And how do you know her?
She is the mother of my client,
All right. And what is your client's name?
Leah.
All right. And do you know how old Leah is?
She's about 14.
Okay. And when did you first have the first contact with Leah in this matter?
In September of 2020.
All right. And who was the person that initiated that contact?
I think it was a mutual agreement between Samantha and Leah that to seek out therapy.
Okay. And were there specific issues that were addressed to you at that time?
Yes.
All right. And what types of issues were those?
Anxiety surrounding this case was the big issue.
Okay. So with the first time you said that you saw her was in September, I didn't catch if you said the year. What year would that have been?
That would have been 2020.
Okay. And do you know at the time that you started seeing Leah, was she on any medication at that time?
I don't recall.
Okay. But that's not something that you would be doing in your role as counselor, correct?
Exactly, no.
All right. How would you describe Leah's overall mental state with regard to this anxiety at the time that you started treating in September of 2020?
When I first started seeing Leah, she was having many panic attacks. That was a big symptom. Another symptom was excessive worry, a lot of worry over this case and what's going to happen, and a fear is another symptom that she experienced.
All right. Were there specific worries that were addressed?
Yes, according to my client, she was worried and continues to worry that she will have to spend time with her biological father, which is something that makes her feel uncomfortable based on what she's reported to me.
Okay. Now, since September of 2020, how often have you seen Leah?
We were doing every week up until maybe 2 months ago, and she showed a lot of improvement. So we moved down to every other week.
Okay. So when you say up until about 2 months ago, approximately December?
Yes.
Okay. And when you talk about improvements you made, describe these improvements for the court, please.
She's really learned to be able to manage that anxiety. She obviously still has those days. That's why she's still coming in. But she's learning those skills, which is just what we love to see. And that's the improvement that we're really seeing.
Okay. So is she, and again, you didn't know this at the time, but do you know, is she on any anxiety medication or depression medication or anything like that, if you're aware?
I would have to look it up. I'm sorry. I don't want to say yes or no if I'm not sure.
Okay. Do you believe that it's in Leah's best interest to continue counseling in this matter?
To continue counseling, yes, definitely.
Okay. Do you feel that you've met with Leah well enough that you have a good handle on, what her concerns are with regarding to having parenting time with Mr. Winkler?
Yes, she definitely makes what her concerns are clear to me, and she expresses them very well.
All right. If the court were to order parenting time between Leah and Mr. Winkler, in your opinion as her counselor, do you believe that that would be something that would be a positive thing for her mental or emotional health?
I believe it would be a struggle for her. It would be a setback in her mental health in the therapy stages.
Okay.
She's definitely learned the skills, but that's a big fear of hers. And for a fear to come true, could be detrimental.
Okay. Do you feel that you know Leah well enough to be able to assess whether or not she's an appropriate maturity for her age?
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah.
Okay. And you think that she is capable of making decisions that would be appropriate for a 14-year-old to make and understand the ramifications of those decisions?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. So would you describe the progress that the two of you have made since September of 2020 as being minimal or substantial, or how would you describe that?
I would describe it as definitely above moderate. She's on track for the clients that the caliber of clients that I see. She's making progress in an appropriate amount of time, for sure.
Okay, but when you have if you had a setback here, if she were to have parenting time with Mr. Winkler, as you said, do you believe that that would be a minimal setback, or are you able to render an opinion about that?
Yeah, that definitely would be a major setback.
During your sessions, when do you speak about the possibility of her having to have parenting time with Mr. Winkler at all?
That is a hard thing for her to talk about, what that would look like and be like.
Okay. When those discussions about Mr. Winkler come up during your sessions, how does she react?
Avoidance.
Does her behavior change?
She appears more anxious, more tearful.
I don't have any further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you. Counsel, go ahead.
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, let me turn you up on my computer a little bit so I can hear you a little bit better.
I don't know if it's just me, but Ms. Payne, you're crackly on my end.
Am I? Could anybody else have the same issue, or am I coming across okay?
I can hear you better now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that statement was better.
Okay, just let me know if you have difficulty hearing me. So I work for Mr. Winkler. You and I have not spoken before, correct?
Correct.
And you've not spoken to Mr. Winkler at all, correct?
Correct.
All right. So your understanding of what his goals are for his daughter, that's based on what someone else might have told you, not what he's told you, correct?
I'm not sure what his goals are, no.
And that mightn't be part of your job as a counselor for his daughter. Your job is to treat her, not treat the two of them, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so I'm not suggesting that you're doing anything wrong, but you have a very specific assignment, which is to deal with Leah's emotions, correct?
Correct.
Okay, wherever they came from, however they developed, your goal is to work on her, right?
Correct.
And you started seeing her in September of 2020. Did I hear that correctly?
Correct.
Did she reach out to you? Did her mom reach out to you, or someone else?
Usually how it works is we have to have a parent reach out to us because they have to have the parent's permission.
Okay. And how often did you start seeing her? Was it like every week, every other week?
We started off with every week.
Okay. And did that change at any point in time?
Yep, we moved down a couple months ago to every other week based on her progress.
Okay. Do you know whether she was prescribed medication from anyone else to deal with the anxiety that you described?
As I mentioned before, I can't recall off the top of my head, so I don't want to say yes or no.
Okay. Do you know whether she's taking any medications now?
I'm not sure.
Okay. When is the last time you had a session with Leah?
This past week, I had a session with Leah.
Okay, so they're continuing.
Oh yes, definitely.
So one thing that you said is that that she expresses some anxiety, panic attacks, and excessive worries over this case, meaning her father's request for parenting time with her. Is that what you meant?
Yes, correct.
Okay. And in your role as her counselor, is part of your job to kind of talk to her about what the case is about and how it works? Or are you just listening to her feelings and helping her cope with her feelings?
More of just listening to her feelings and helping her cope with the feelings.
Okay, because again, we've established you don't know what the goals are in this case, so to talk to her about what's happening next, how it works, you would not know that, correct?
Exactly. I do not know that and do not wish to express that to her and help her, that's not part of my professional job.
So what kind of coping skills have you given her to help her handle that excessive worry and anxiety?
Yes. So we really worked a lot on our thinking patterns and how we think about things. I worked with her on grounding skills, relaxation skills, different things like that to really help her. But a big thing is working on her thinking and what to do when she experiences those worries.
Okay. And if I heard you correctly, she's doing better now that as treatment has progressed with her. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I bet like everyone else, there are days when it's good and days when it's bad, but overall, she's doing better under your care. Would you agree with me?
I would agree, yes.
Okay. How many, in your practice, how many children have you treated either now or in the past who are going through family court like this?
So before I worked with Positive Counseling Center, I worked with Positive Counseling Center since August of 2020. Before I worked there, I worked with foster youth at Sunnycrest Youth Ranch as a residential facility. So I've dealt with a lot of kids dealing with court.
Okay. And for how many years would you say?
I worked at Sunnycrest Youth Ranch for almost 2 years and then here for about 6 months. So.
Okay. All right. And in your experience working with youth who have gone through family court, it's not unusual for them to express anxiety over the court process, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And would you describe Leah as being kind of, I hate to say average, so you tell me what word you would use. Is she kind of like typical for kids going through the court process or atypical or whatever adjective you would use?
I would say due to her having panic attacks over it, it's a little bit more severe than what I see on average. But I'm not a professional in that area to make that statement, I would say.
Okay. Would that be something that like a psychiatrist would just determine, or some other type of professional?
Maybe like a GAL or someone that can monitor that a little bit better.
Okay. When you were working with youth in the foster care system, did you ever work on reunification therapy where there'd be an introduction of a parent back into a child's life?
Yes.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit more about that? How is that typically done?
When I did that, we would have parent sessions weekly and
Okay.
do a joint family session weekly.
Okay. Have you and Leah talked about whether that is an option for her and her father? Has that topic come up at all?
That topic has not come up.
Okay. And she may not even know that that's an option. I'm not suggesting you needed to relay that to her, but that idea has not come up in your sessions with her, correct?
Correct.
Do you think that let's say the court is inclined to allow this building of a relationship, do you think that some therapeutic component first before we introduce regular contact would be appropriate for Leah?
I don't feel like I'm in the position to make that suggestion.
Okay, all right. But what I do hear you saying is to just start having contact right away would not be a good idea, correct?
I feel like that would be a big jump. No matter any contact at all, I feel like would be a setback and cause anxiety.
Okay. Let's say that there is contact between Leah and her father. What kind of coping skills or services do you think Leah would benefit from to deal with that's what you anticipate being a setback?
Definitely continuing therapy and using the coping skills that we already know to use, like the grounding skills, the relaxation skills, and the mindfulness, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Has she expressed any suicidal ideation or self-harm thoughts over the idea of having a relationship with her father?
She has never expressed any thoughts like that.
Okay. But just some anxiety and worry over the idea, correct?
Correct.
And that would not be unusual for a child who's hasn't had a relationship with her father. It's new. So one would assume that there would be some anxiety and worry over that. Do you agree with me?
I agree, yes.
Okay. All right. If the court were to require some effort of therapy or just some reunification therapy, is that something that you would provide, or would it be someone else whose role is just to work on dad and daughter?
I would not feel comfortable providing that. I would suggest someone with just that role.
Okay, and that's not because you don't like Mr. Winkler, it's because your duty is just to Leah, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so you're not coming to court here to express any opinion as to whether there should be therapy. You're just relaying what you feel is appropriate for Leah based on her emotions, however they develop. True statement?
True statement, exactly.
Okay, all right. I have no further questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller, redirect.
Just brief, Your Honor. So in your experience, you said that you've worked with kids dealing with the court system before, correct?
Correct.
Just so I'm clear, so the anxiety you do not believe is necessarily attributed to the fact that there's a court process, but rather to having contact with Mr. Winkler itself, correct?
Correct.
All right. And you do not believe that you would be in a position to provide reunification counseling if that was ordered by the court, correct?
Correct.
But you also believe that it would be, I think you said a big step if the next step in this process would be to put Mr. Winkler and Leah in counseling together, correct?
Correct.
Has she relayed specific concerns about why she's so anxious about having contact with Mr. Winkler?
Yes.
Okay, and what are those concerns?
Her concerns are Mr. Winkler's past and his charges.
Okay. Have you, in your experience, have you worked with children before that have had significant amounts of time that have passed without having contact between the parent and the child?
Not generally, no. Generally, they've had that relationship.
Okay. In this particular case, are you aware what kind of time period has elapsed between Leah and Mr. Winkler having any kind of contact?
From my understanding, that they haven't had contact.
Okay. And so if Leah's 14 years old and she hasn't had contact for the majority of her life, would that be a different situation than if somebody had just simply been apart for a couple of years, for example?
Yes, that would be different.
Okay. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Payne. Any follow-up?
No follow-up.
All right, give me just a moment, please. Thank you. I have no other questions. Any objection to excusing this witness?
None, Judge, and I would request that she be released from her subpoena.
No objections. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Verrett, very much. We appreciate you being available, and you are excused.
Thank you.
Moving forward, Mr. Miller, any other witnesses?
Well, I don't know if Ms. Payne is planning on calling her client. I mean, if she is, she can call him first if she wants. Otherwise, the only other witness I have is her client. So,
Okay. Ms. Payne, what's your preference?
I am going to call him as part of our motion, but since we're dealing with Mr. Miller's motion first, I think he should probably call him in his case in chief.
that's fine, Judge. I'll call Christopher Winkler.
All right. Mr. Winkler, please raise your right hand for me. You solemnly swear to tell the truth, so help you God.
I do, sir.
All right, thank you. Give me just one quick moment. I have a noise in the courtroom. I'm gonna stop. Just 1 minute. Okay, thank you. Ms. Payne, did you have something?
I did. Mr. Winkler's spouse, who's one of my witnesses, is on the Zoom screen with him. We did sequester everyone before we broke last time. So
Okay.
I would nicely ask her to exit the room so that we can call her in our case if needed. So Sarah, if you could, thank you, but I want to make sure that you're available as a witness. And since you are still sequestered, you probably shouldn't hear the testimony.
Yes, thank you for that. Okay, I believe we're all set. So at this time, Mr. Miller, go ahead.
All right. Mr. Winkler, could you please state your full legal name for the record and spell your last?
Christopher Lee Winkler, Winkler.
Okay. And where do you currently reside?
2567 116th Avenue in Allegan, Michigan.
All right. How long have you resided there?
Almost a year and a half.
Okay. Who do you reside there with?
Sarah and our 3 kids.
Are you currently employed?
Yes, sir.
Where are you employed at?
Steel case.
How long have you been there?
Just shy of a year and a half. A year and 4 months.
All right. Do you know my client?
Yes, I do.
How do you know her?
We dated for a while and have a daughter together.
Okay. When did you start dating?
I believe it was May of 2005 or 2000. Yeah, 2005, I believe.
Okay. At some point, did that relationship end?
Yes.
And when did it end?
December 2006.
Okay. And why did it end in December of 2006?
She sent me a letter when I was incarcerated saying she couldn't do it anymore, didn't want to be apart from me. It was too hard on her to raise Leah by herself and come see me.
Okay. So let's talk about your incarceration. When were you incarcerated?
2005 to 2011, and then 2 parole violations after that.
Okay. We're going to walk through this one step at a time. So when you were incarcerated in 2005, why were you incarcerated?
Criminal sexual conduct, 2nd degree.
Okay. Did you plead guilty or were you found guilty after a trial?
I pled guilty.
Okay. And how old was the person that you engaged in criminal sexual conduct with?
15.
It's true, sir, that you were actually charged though with 2 counts of CSC 3rd degree, correct?
I don't recall. That was a long time ago.
All right. And so you were incarcerated until 2011, but what was the sentence that you were given with?
5 to 15.
Okay. This 15-year-old, was it somebody that you knew?
Yes.
Was it a family friend?
Yes.
Okay. So at some point you said that you had a child with my client. When did you learn that my client was pregnant?
I was a month, maybe a little more into my prison sentence.
And how did you find out?
My sister told me.
Okay. At the time that you went into prison, how old were you?
21,
How old was my client?
20, I believe.
All right. And at some point you said you got out in 2011
Yes, sir.
and you said you had 2 parole violations.
Yes.
When was the first parole violation?
It was August or September of 2011.
And what was the nature of the violation?
Internet use.
And what additional sentence were you given as a result of that?
18 months. Year and a half.
All right. What month did you get out of prison?
In 2011?
Yep.
January.
All right. So from January 2011 until August or September of 2011, or at whatever point you went back into prison after the first parole violation, did you have any contact with Leah Winkler at that time?
No, I initiated the child support order so that I could work towards that. I attempted to contact Samantha, and every time I've contacted her, she has blocked me on Facebook or changed her phone number. She will not allow me to have contact with my daughter.
Okay. Did you file any motions with the court to be able to get parenting time at that time?
No, I did before I was released, but that was shot down because I was incarcerated.
So what was the nature of your motion that you filed when you were incarcerated?
I just wanted to be able to maintain contact with her, whether it be through letters, phone calls, visits that the court would have allowed. But they said they didn't feel comfortable doing that at that time.
Okay. All right. So at that point, you were sentenced to 18 months. So do you recall when was the next time that you got out of prison after the first parole violation?
Would have been February of 2013.
All right. Then at what point after that first parole violation did you have the second parole violation?
It was almost 2 years later. It was October of 2014.
All right. And what was the nature of the second parole violation?
Again, internet use. It was a phone that had connected or the ability to connect to the internet, even though it was not.
Okay, what kind of sentence or sanctions were you given at that time?
Same, 18 months.
So when did you start that incarceration, that period?
October 2013 or 2014.
All right, so between February of 2013 and October of 2014, did you file any motions to get parenting time with Leah at that time?
No motions, no, but I again attempted to contact Miss Sherry and tried to explain to her that I'm trying to stay in contact. I'm trying to get a relationship going with my daughter, and if she would respond, it was never anything positive, never anything productive.
Okay, so what point did you get out of prison after the second parole violation?
March of 2016.
All right, and from March, once you were out in March 2016, when was the first time that you filed any motion regarding parenting time?
It would be for this case. It was the first time I filed a motion. That's been a year and a half or so now.
So in November of 2019, when you filed your motion?
If that's when it was filed, yes.
So from March of 2016 until November of 2019, you didn't file any motions for
No.
parenting time?
No, but again, tried contacting Miss Butters on Facebook.
Okay,
And
sir, I'm asking you questions. I asked no other motions. That's all. I just answered my question. All right. So, sir, I want to go back to the beginning here. How long were you dating my client before you went to prison?
Before prison, about approximately 6 months.
Sir, is it true that basically while you were in prison, you ended up getting a tattoo on the left side of your neck with my client's name on it?
And Leah, yes.
So it's also true that you also on the left side of your neck, you have Leah's name tattooed there?
Yes.
Okay. How many times have you seen Leah in her lifetime?
3 or no. It was on a fairly regular basis, I feel like, when she was younger, but after she was about 6 months old, I haven't.
So you haven't seen Leah at all since she's been 6 months old?
Correct, other than pictures.
And how have you seen pictures of her?
Samantha sent them to me. My family sent them to me after Samantha would allow them to visit with Leah up until she was about 2 years old.
When was the last time that Samantha would have sent you a picture?
December of 2016. No, I believe she sent some after that, but that's the last time that her and I were together. I mean, I have
December 2016 or December 2006?
or 6. I'm sorry. I do have all the pictures and the letters that Samantha sent. I could go back and check.
Did Samantha have a sister?
2, I believe.
Okay. Do you know what their names were?
Katie and Bethany,
Okay. Were they older or younger than her?
both younger.
Okay. Do you know how old Katie was when you went to prison?
I believe she was 16 or 17.
Okay. Isn't it true that while you were in prison, you sent letters to Katie?
Regarding my daughter, yes.
Okay. So it was only with regard to your daughter?
Yes.
So if I have a letter here that says that you were asking her to come visit you, that would be a forgery?
If it did not include bringing my daughter, yes.
Your Honor, is the court set up, because I know I had problems with this the other day, to do a screen share?
I'll have to defer to my help in Nuevo. I don't know. They're co-hosting.
It should be able to screen share.
My Zoom screen does show a green share button. So Mr. Miller, you probably already have that set up on your.
Yeah, I do on my end, but the court has to trigger something on their end in order for it to show up. So the other day, the circuit court had to do something in order to make it work. So I'll try it. We'll see what happens here.
Yeah, it looks like it's already set up that way.
All right, is that up on everybody's screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, so this is a letter that's addressed to a Katie, dated October 8th, 2008. Do you recognize the handwriting that's in this letter?
Yes, sir.
Does that appear to be your handwriting?
Yes.
Okay. Is this signature here appear to be your signature?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Does this look like it's a letter that you sent to Katie when you were in prison?
I don't recall, but it very well could be.
Okay. Well, why don't you take a second and review it here and let me know if this rings a bell, whether or not you sent this letter.
Yeah, I believe so.
All right. So I'm going to point you out to a couple of statements here. Right here in the middle of the screen, it says, "I think Sam is a little jealous of you and I talking and getting along. LOL, exclamation point, exclamation point." Does that have anything to do with Leah?
No, the only time we ever talked.
Sir, just answer the question. Does that
No,
statement have anything to do with Leah?
No,
Okay. Then yes or no. It says, if you're lucky, there might be one in here for you also after you just got done talking about sending Leah a card. Does that statement have anything to do with Leah?
No.
Okay, down here it says, in February, I'm allowed to change my visitors list. Do you want me to add you? Does that have anything to do with Leah?
No.
So why were you talking to my client's sister who wasn't even an adult at that point?
Because when we had talked, she had told me that she would try to bring Leah up to see her, or up to see me. In order for her to do that, she had to have been on my approved visitors list. As far as the card goes, she had said that she really liked how I was doing them because I made them by hand. So I told her I would send her one.
So you're trying to tell me, sir, under oath, that you didn't have any improper purposes trying to talk with a minor here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Your Honor, I'm going to move for admission of, I don't know what we want to call this, but
Do you have a hard copy, Mr. Miller?
I do, Judge. What we did the other day is that I just basically, as soon as we conclude, I'll label it, whatever we label it, have my staff send it to both Ms. Payne and then the court.
All right. Any objection, Ms. Payne?
Based on Mr. Winkler's testimony, no, I think that it's admissible.
All right. I agree, and I'll accept this as an exhibit. I don't recall having any other exhibits submitted yet. Is that, so this would be exhibit 1?
Yes, Judge.
Your Honor.
Okay, so we'll accept this as plaintiff's exhibit 1. Okay.
All right. Mr. Winkler, after you got out of prison in 2000 and after you were released from prison here in 2016, you said there was no motions that were filed up until November of 2019, but did you make any attempts to contact Leah directly?
Not directly, no.
Okay. Isn't it true that you were trying to access a file, a YouTube channel that involved Leah through her school?
Yes, I did subscribe to it.
All right. And you also basically were obtaining pictures of Leah that you were able to find elsewhere on the internet and posting them on a Facebook page?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you previously had a Facebook page, but you no longer do?
That's correct.
Okay. And at some point, a personal protection order was actually obtained and entered against your significant other as a result of this attempts to contact Leah, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what is the status of you and your significant other? Is that your wife, or are you guys dating, or what's the situation?
We're engaged. We've been together for 7 years.
Okay.
Known each other.
Do you have other children with her?
3.
Do you have other children besides those 3 and Leah?
I do.
How many other children?
1.
How old is that other child?
He is 6.
Do you have contact with that 6-year-old?
Yes, I do.
If you had contact with that 6-year-old his entire life?
Most of it,
Okay, why do you say most of it?
because I was locked up for 1.5 years. And he did come to see me, but it wasn't on a regular basis.
Did you have to file a motion to be able to obtain that parenting time?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Winkler, are you engaged in any type of counseling at this time?
Not at this time, no.
When's the last time you've been engaged in any kind of counseling?
We went through Reunification Therapy with Rowan almost 1 year ago.
Is Rowan the 6-year-old?
Yes, sir.
When did you start reunification counseling with Rowan?
I want to say it was probably February or March of 2020.
And when did that end?
It was only going on for a month or 2 every week.
And who is the counselor that you were seeing?
I don't remember her name. It was somebody that Rowan had been seeing prior.
All right, you know what grade Leah is in school?
I assume she's a freshman in high school.
So you're just guessing at that?
Yeah, I haven't had any contact with her or Samantha, so guessing based on her age would be.
All right. So if Leah told the judge that she didn't want to see you, would you respect that? Or do you think that you should still be able to see her over her objection?
I think she has a right to know both sides of the story, not just what she's been told by her mom.
Well, what do you think the other side of the story is?
Well, based on the things I've heard Samantha say under oath over the last couple of court dates we've had, I can't imagine it was anything nice.
Well, but your past is not nice, is it?
No, it's not, but it was also almost 20 years ago.
Okay, so this 15-year-old that you initially went to prison over, you actually had sexual penetration with this young lady on multiple occasions, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you heard my client testify the last time that basically you were engaged in sexual intercourse with her and allowed one of your friends and encouraged one of your friends to participate. Do you remember that testimony?
I do remember that testimony. I also remember the state police investigation that said nothing happened.
All right. So, but that was based solely off of basically statements that were given by you and her, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So isn't it possible, sir, that they just could have believed your denial more than hers?
Yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't mean it didn't actually happen, does it?
No, it does not.
So your position under oath here today is that didn't take place?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Were you having sex with her in the tent that day as she alleged?
Yes.
Okay, but it's just, you know, the rest of it was made up, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Mr. Winkler, do you have any other criminal history besides that which we've talked about today?
Yes. Uttering and publishing counterfeit notes when I was 17.
Were you charged as an adult?
Yes.
And what happened in that particular charge?
I was given unsupervised probation.
what happened though? What was the background to why you were charged with uttering and publishing and ultimately convicted?
My brother and a friend of ours and I made scanned and printed $20 bills.
And you were part of that?
Yes.
All right. How old are you today?
Excuse me, 36.
Any other criminal history besides those two things?
One of the probation or parole violations was failure to comply with sex offender registration because of the internet use.
So you actually had 3 parole violations?
No, 2. The first one of the 2 actually had a felony attached to it.
The first one did?
Yes, in 2011.
And what happened in that situation?
That was the 1.5 years.
No, but I mean, you failed to register?
No, it was failure to comply with the Sex Offender Registration Act on the internet usage.
Okay, so the internet usage was what led to the failure to comply.
Correct.
While you were incarcerated, sir, did you have any disciplinary complaints that were lodged against you?
No.
Mr. Winkler, are you aware of how Leah has been doing academically in school?
No.
Are you aware of whether or not Leah is seeing a physician on a regular basis?
No.
Okay. Have you sent any communication to my client at any time since you were released in 2016 asking for any of this information?
No.
Okay. Are you aware where my client goes to school?
Yes.
And how did you become aware of that?
Through, I believe it was something on YouTube or one of the pictures listing roster for track, I believe, was something. She was listed on the roster for track and field.
Okay, so you're essentially doing internet searches looking for her.
For my daughter, yes.
Okay. Have you contacted the school and presented that you were the legal father and you're requesting information about her?
No.
Sir, isn't it true that on one of your parole violations, the reason that it wasn't really about using the internet so much as it was that you had other email accounts that you didn't disclose to your parole officer?
It was an email address that was linked to that Facebook account.
Okay, but again, sir, what I just said, it was a result of an email that you didn't disclose to your parole officer.
Not the parole officer, to the sex offender registration.
Okay. That's not what you told us earlier. You said it was regarding to internet use.
It was based on the Facebook use or the Facebook account that was found by my parole agent. Having an email address is not a violation. It's using the email address.
So since you got out in 2016, did you go through any other counseling besides the reunification counseling with your 6-year-old son?
No, sir.
Sir, do you own any firearms?
No,
Have you ever made any Facebook posts about firearms?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Have you ever made any Facebook posts about firearms?
Maybe about gun rights. I don't recall.
Okay, if you recall making a posting about, if your spouse has 1 hour to reply or she's got to buy you a new gun.
Yeah, I do recall that.
Okay, but you're not supposed to have firearms as a convicted felon, correct?
Absolutely.
So why would you post that?
It was a joke. I also posted one that said she had an hour, she had to buy me pizza too.
Sir, I asked you about the gun.
Yeah.
Sir, with regard to any of your other children, have you had any complaints filed against you by Child Protective Services?
No.
Sir, at what point were you charged with this original CSC 2 counts of CSC 3rd degree?
I believe it was February or March of 2011 or 2005, excuse me.
Are you saying February of 2005?
Yes.
Okay. So at what point would you have started dating my client then, before or after that?
After May.
Okay. So at what point in the relationship did you tell my client that you had these charges pending against you?
Fairly early. She went to multiple court dates with me and met with the attorney with me.
So if my client testifies against, that that's not true, would she be lying?
Yes, she would.
Sir, at what point were you formally released from parole?
March 28th of 2018.
All right, Mr. Winkler, I want to draw your attention to the original motion that basically was filed to establish parenting time in this case. It was only signed by your attorney. Did you review that before it was signed?
I don't recall.
You don't recall.
I don't recall if I reviewed it before it was signed or not.
So in that, I want to draw your attention to page 2. Do you have a copy of that with you?
Yes, hang on. I believe I do. I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it right now. I'm sure I have it somewhere.
But we'll try it this way. Otherwise, I can try to scan this and screen share it for you. But at least after the document was filed, you had a chance to review it, correct?
Yes.
And it was signed by Ms. Payne, who is your attorney, correct?
Yes.
You hired her to act on your behalf.
Yes.
Okay. And in there, it says on the top of page 2, subletter A, it says, quote, the party's daughter is a teenager, period. She knows who her father is, but has not spent time with him in several years, period. Okay. You recall that statement?
Yes.
So the fact that your daughter had not spent time with you in several years, that's not a true statement, is it?
If several, it could be more than a couple, yes.
13?
Okay. Yeah, it's been quite a few.
Subletter C, the third sentence in that paragraph, it says, quote, he pays his child support in full and on time, period, close quote. So it's your testimony, sir, that basically whenever you have not been incarcerated, you have paid your child support in full?
Unless it was between jobs and it took a minute to get reestablished, yes.
Okay, but you didn't put that in there, did you?
No.
Are you current on your child support right now?
But I mean, we're referring to a couple of weeks.
Are you current on your child support as we sit here right now?
Yes, sir. I owe zero.
Okay. When did that zero balance get paid off?
July of last year.
So if the court takes judicial notice of your child support history, whatever that says is got to be true, correct?
The child support history, yeah, I have it if you'd like it.
Sir, I'm asking the questions, okay? Just yes or no.
I said yes.
Sir, subletter D says, quote, defendant is willing to take whatever steps are necessary with therapy to reestablish this relationship in a way that is not harmful to their daughter, end quote. But if it's deemed to be harmful towards you to be able to have reunification counseling at this point in your daughter's life, are you still fighting that?
Harmful to me?
Harmful to your daughter.
Oh, I don't believe it would be harmful to my daughter in any way.
Okay, but what if a counselor says that it is?
Then I would rethink it.
So it's fair to say, Mr. Winkler, that you basically have had almost no contact with this 14-year-old child for the majority of her life, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Winkler, has some of the payments that have been made for your child support been as a result of tax refunds and other things being intercepted?
The past due amount, yes. The regular payments come from my paycheck.
Your Honor, I don't believe I have anything further for this witness at this time.
Very good, Ms. Payne.
Your Honor, I actually don't have any question for Mr. Winkler through Mr. Miller's motion. He covered the same questions I would cover, so I have no questions for him.
All right, thank you. I have no questions either at this point. So moving forward, Mr. Miller, any other witnesses in this matter?
None, Judge.
Pardon me?
None.
Oh, none. Okay. How about you, Ms. Payne?
So just as a point of clarification, Your Honor, are we just handling Mr. Miller's motion to terminate rights for purposes of adoption, or are we handling my motion for unification therapy at the same time? 'Cause I thought we were doing his first and then mine second. Is that right?
Well, we're still addressing, last time we left, we got through a substantial amount of testimony, and then the court was advised that there would be a stipulation for custody. And that was eventually submitted and signed. And so the continuation today was designed to take testimony from the counselor, which we did, and from Mr. Winkler, which we did. And that was initially on, I believe, addressing the part of Mr. Miller's motion. And I don't see any reason why we can't address both of the motions regarding parenting time at this point. We have the time set aside for that.
Right. No, I don't disagree. I just wasn't sure if the court was going to make because Mr. Miller has filed an adoption request to terminate my client's parental rights, and I wasn't sure if the court was going to be ruling on that first or addressing everything in one ruling.
Well, I think the prudent thing to do at this point, and what I had initially intended to do, unless both counsel have a different thought for me on that, is to simply address the matters on the table with respect to parenting time and those issues. And then once a decision has been made with that, then determine if and how to move forward on the other file, which is the adoption file, which includes the requested termination.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And there's reasons for doing that, to keep those two separate. I think the prudent thing to do would be to deal, not to try to piecemeal it, but to deal with the primary issues of the parenting time issue at this point, and then proceed with on a different date and time, if appropriate, proceed with the matters relative to the adoption file, because that will get into the two primary issues of parenting time or contact and child support for a 2-year period.
Okay. Okay. So then I will turn to my motion and call Mr. Winkler in my case in chief.
All right. And before we do that, Mr. Miller, are you agreeable to the general approach I just stated?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, Judge.
Okay. All right.
And that was kind of my understanding, that you were going to take judicial notice pretty much of all the testimony across these cases to limit, what we have to. I mean, obviously, if the court allows the step-parent adoption to proceed to a hearing, at that point, then it becomes very specific by nature of testimony on contact and child support at that point. But aside for everything else, I think it makes sense. We've got the time allocated today. Let's knock it out of the way and go from there.
Okay. All right. So with that, at this point in time, Ms. Payne is going to call in her case in chief on her motion, Mr. Winkler. So Mr. Winkler, I have already sworn you in today, so you're sworn under oath, and I'll turn matters over to your attorney, Ms. Payne.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Winkler, can you hear me okay?
You're a little quiet, but yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'll speak up and lean in. Tell me if it's difficult to hear me.
Okay.
So you filed a motion in 2019 to reunite with your daughter, correct?
Yes.
Why did you wait until 2019 as opposed to when you were released from incarceration?
One of my parole stipulations was not to have any contact with minors including my own kids. It took me 11 months to get permission to be around my son, Christopher, who I had regular contact with while I was incarcerated. Took me 11 months after being released to have permission to be around him.
Okay. Did you, when that restriction was relieved, did you make any effort to contact Samantha, your daughter's mother, to try to work out some kind of contact before going to court?
Yes, ma'am. I sent her Facebook messages, and I don't know if I had her. I'm a little fuzzy on the time frame, if that was the time I had her phone number or if it was before that.
Did she respond to any of your requests?
No, ma'am.
Were you hopeful that she would?
I was hopeful, yes.
Okay. Why not just give up at that point? Why take it the next step and file a motion in court?
That's my daughter. I mean, I've always loved her since she was a little baby, and I held her in my arms.
Okay. You've not spoken to your daughter about your criminal history, correct?
No, I have not.
Have you had anyone speak to her about your criminal history on your behalf?
No, I have not.
Do you know if anyone connected with you, like spouse, family member, someone has told her about your criminal history on your behalf?
Not that I know of.
Is it safe to say that if she knows about it, it's come from somebody other than you, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How does it make you feel as her father that she might not have the complete picture of events?
It doesn't feel good.
Okay, all right. Now, in your motion, you left it open. You didn't ask for a specific schedule. You said, let's start with something. What did you mean by that? And why did you leave the request open?
Well, because I know that it is a unique situation. I know my past. I'm not proud of my past, but it's there. I still carry it around every day. It's not going to go away anytime soon. But I figured I would leave it up to the courts as far as their discretion. What they assumed was going to be the best for Leah, whether it be reintegration therapy or, supervised visits, whatever the court decided. I'll do whatever I have to do.
Let's say that starts just with therapy. Are you willing to do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
What if it requires some supervised parenting time? Are you willing to do that?
Anything, whatever it takes. Yes.
Okay, so if you envision like how much time it's going to take, you'll take whatever time is necessary. True statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, your other child, Mr. Miller asked you during his case in chief about your son. We have a case in Ionia County, correct?
Yes.
And you engaged in reunification therapy with him, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And how did that go?
It went very well. He was very quiet and anxious at first. Didn't do a whole lot of talking, but then as it went on, he started opening up. He knew, that I was dad. They had established, before I came into the therapy sessions, that he was going to be, meeting dad, and it was set up in advance. It's not like they just threw us in a room and said, "Here's your dad."
Okay. And you took all the steps that were required of the therapist in that case to do that therapy, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. In that case, did your son's mother, was she resistant at first to you having contact with your son?
Yes, she was.
Okay. All right. That's since changed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You're currently married to Sarah, who
Engaged.
Sorry, thank you for correcting me.
No problem.
Who was on the Zoom screen before. The two of you are engaged to be married, correct?
Yes.
And how many children do you have together?
We have 3 together.
Okay. Has she ever expressed to you any concerns about your role as a parent?
No.
Okay. Have any of her family members ever expressed to you any concerns about your role as a parent?
Not that I've ever heard of.
Okay. Other than the times that you've sought out contact with your daughter, has Samantha, her mother, ever, expressed concerns about your ability as a parent, your safety, your criminal history, or has it come about after you've made efforts to have contact with your daughter?
Not to me.
Okay. Did you, before she testified at our last hearing, were you aware of this allegation that you sexually assaulted her in a tent?
She had brought it up before when I had filed for parenting time when I was in prison
I
to
see.
try to get phone calls and letters and visits.
Okay. Were you ever granted phone call or letter or visit privileges with your daughter?
From the courts, no.
Okay. And why is that? Do you know?
They just said that they didn't feel comfortable granting that motion at the time.
At the time. Okay. Is it true that you were doing some internet searches to find out more information about your daughter sometime in 2020?
Yes,
And why were you doing that?
because I had no other way. I tried contacting Samantha. Anytime that I tried to contact her, I was blocked on Facebook, or her number would change, or I was blocked on her phone. I want to know about my daughter. I have every picture that has ever been sent to me, whether it be from Samantha or my family or her family.
I noticed, Mr. Winkler, you keep looking down. You kind of keep those in a bag, right?
I do. I have them all together, my photo albums and letters saying how Leah's doing and when she was younger, obviously. But
Okay. Did you ever contact Leah directly as part of this internet searching that you were doing?
no, I was never able to.
Okay. What is your hope? What do you hope to get out of reunification therapy if it's granted with your daughter?
I want to know my daughter. I want my daughter to know me. We have my whole side of her family. It's eagerly awaiting every court date, and most of my family spent 2 years of her life with her. They spent more time with her than I was able to, and they love that little girl too.
Okay. I have no further questions for Mr. Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Miller.
I think you're still muted, Mr. Miller.
But Mr. Winkler, did I understand you correctly earlier this morning that you said you had some contact, whether it be while you were in prison or while you were out of prison, previously with your son?
Yes,
All right. And Rowan is only 6 years old right now, right?
that's correct.
So there's a drastic age difference between Rowan and Leah, correct?
Yes, there is.
You also really didn't see Leah. I mean, when you saw her, she was less than 6 months old, correct?
That's correct.
So we can presume she doesn't remember you being that young, right?
That's fair.
All right. And you only went to reunification counseling for a month or two with him, right?
Yes, that's all the therapist said was needed.
Okay, but you had contact with him and he was 6 years old. So there's a big difference here, right?
Yes.
Now, why did you say at the beginning of your testimony to your attorney that it took 11 months to be around your son?
I had to get special permission through my parole agent from the Michigan Parole Board to be around any minors, and it had to be specific. I had to petition the parole board for an individual, not just to be around minors in general.
All right. And so there was no petition that was made on your behalf at that point to be around Leah during that time, right?
No, there was not.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Payne, any follow-up?
Yes, just briefly.
Go ahead.
Mr. Winkler, why did you not include your daughter, Leah, at the time you made that petition to the parole?
I talked to my parole agent about it, and he said when the time came that the court said I could be around her, he would grant it.
I see. You weren't ready to do that, it sounds like, or that wasn't the right time.
Right.
Okay. All right. I have no further questions for Mr. Winkler.
Anything else, Mr. Miller?
None, Judge.
All right, just a moment, please. All right, thank you. I have no questions either, Mr. Winkler. Ms. Payne, any other witnesses?
No, for our motion, just Mr. Winkler.
All right. Mr. Miller, any witnesses?
None, Judge.
All right. So has both parties completed their testimony regarding their respective motions?
Aside from the step parent adoption, issue, Judge, yes.
Okay, all right,
Yes, Your Honor.
okay. Well, I think the prudent thing to do at this point would be to take final argument on each motion, except for the step parent matter, and address those separately so that I can keep that information clear, and then we'll proceed accordingly. So with respect to Mr. Miller's motion, final argument, Mr. Miller?
Well, Judge, I think my motion is largely moot because, my motion essentially dealt with three things. Number one, the motion regarding the legal and physical custody, that was actually consented to by Mr. Winkler on the record the last time that we were here. So I think that resolves that matter. The holdup in the step parent adoption, as we were told by your staff, was that, there was no finding of legal custody at that point, and there now has been a finding of legal custody. So I think that number one, my motion is moot, as those issues have been determined with regard to physical and legal custody. My client now does possess, as a result of the entry of the last order, physical and legal custody. I think that also enables her the ability, clearly under the step parent adoption statute, to be able to proceed at that point. So, we would request, with regard to that the court allow the step parent adoption petition that was already pending in the middle of this to be able to proceed. With regard to my argument in response to Ms. Payne's motion, I think it's prudent to let her argue, her argument first, and I get to respond to that. So.
All right. Any response to that part of it, Ms. Payne?
No.
Okay. Then we'll move to your motion, and go ahead.
Sure, Your Honor, our motion is broadly drafted. We're looking to start a relationship, and Mr. Winkler is not making any hidings or suggestions that he should be an equal parenting time guy right up front, or maybe even ever. He said very specifically during his testimony that he wants to know his daughter and have a relationship with his daughter. Our parenting time statute, section 7A of the Child Custody Act, MCL 722.27A, says that parenting time shall be granted in frequency, time, and duration to foster and encourage a relationship between a child and a parent. Now, there is a section of that statute that says if there's clear and convincing evidence that parenting time is not in the child's best interest, that it may be suspended or modified in some way. But that's not the request here, nor was there clear and convincing evidence of that statement. At most, Leah's therapist said that she's anxious, that she has some worries, some panic attacks, but she's been given coping skills. She will continue to receive those coping skills, and that she's been doing better since she started therapy just a couple of months ago in September. The therapist also said that she's not in a position to speak on parent-child relationships and how that would be worked on. She could only discuss how Leah would perceive that because that's her role. And that's not to suggest she's not doing the right thing. And in many ways, she's doing exactly what she should be doing as a therapist, which is not blending those roles. There's no one who has testified that Leah is going to be harmed in any way by trying. And that's all we are asking the court to do. Give us an opportunity to try. The same section of the Child Custody Act indicates under subpart H that the court can use community resources, behavioral resources such as therapists to foster that parenting time relationship. However it turns out being, and as Mr. Winkler indicated in his other case in Ionia County with his son, we have a therapist who was appointed to the family. We followed a protocol with individual sessions and then introducing dad. There was no outside visits for a period of time, as he said, and it worked well. Will the same thing happen with Leah? We hope so. We believe so. The law assumes that should happen, absent some evidence to the contrary. We're not quite there yet. So what we're asking for, Your Honor, is the ability to try parenting time. Starting out with some reunification therapy. And because of that, we should not be talking about step parent adoption yet. We're premature on that. when that does happen, I don't think the court would find the necessary facts to grant it anyway, considering that Mr. Winkler has been paying his child support and does not owe child support at this time. So that's our request in a nutshell, Judge.
All right, thank you. Response, Mr. Miller?
Well, Judge, I think if we start right at the original motion that was filed by Mr. Winkler, that was filed on his behalf by his attorney, we find, as you saw during his testimony today, that the best case scenario is that he was misleading, if not entirely, accurate. He tried to sugarcoat, when the last contact with the child was and paying his child support. He indicated the court could take judicial notice of the child support file, and when you take judicial notice of that, you'll see it wasn't necessarily being truthful. With regard to the parenting time statute, MCL 722.27a, we've got to start with number one, it's presuming that it's in the best interest of the minor child to have contact with the parent. However, it's presumed that there's already a relationship between the child and the parent. In this case, there's no relationship. I mean, this child, Mr. Winkler admits that aside from looking at her in pictures, has not had any contact with this child since she was six months old. She doesn't even know who this guy is. And then instead of taking the appropriate actions to be able to file motions, which he did do when he was in prison, so it's not like we don't know that he's not capable of it, he hasn't taken the time to file any motions on any of these stints that he's had when he's not been in prison to get parenting time until November or October. I think the motion was dated October or November of 2019. So therefore, and his contact was concerning enough to the point that this court ultimately entered a personal protection order against his fiance for trying to contact the minor child. So I think, that it's pretty clear here that, the testimony from Mr. Winkler really supports that it's not in the best interest of this minor child and that it's not healthy for this minor child, which is what the exception to awarding parenting time is. When he sits there and tries to sugarcoat the situation, say the minor child, who's 14, by the way, a 14-year-old girl who's only a year away from the age of the victim that he had in his CSC case, to say that she's not hearing both sides of the story. What's the other side of the story? He's sexually assaulted on multiple occasions. He admitted to that under oath. On multiple occasions engaged in sexual penetration against a 15-year-old girl, at which point he went to prison from 2005 to 2011. And then even then he didn't learn his lesson. He ended up having 2 parole violations where he served an additional 36 months total between those 2 things. Then we take it a step further and he tries to sugarcoat things saying, well, I went to 1 or 2 months of reunification counseling to see my son. But what he doesn't tell you up front is that basically he was seeing the child while he was basically in prison and in between stints of prison. And he had to undergo an 11-month period from his parole officer from the parole board before he was even allowed to have contact with the child that he had been having contact with. So to sit here and presume what the parole board would have did with a 13-year-old at that point, or a 12-year-old, however Leah was, to allow him to have contact with the child, he's had 0 contact, and by the way, is in the same range of the very victim that basically he perped on, which is what sent him to prison in the first place. That is something that the court needs to take into consideration when we look at whether or not visitation with Mr. Winkler and this child would, quote, endanger the child's physical, mental, or emotional health. The counselor, who doesn't have a horse in this race other than the best interest of this little girl, has testified that basically seeing Mr. Winkler or having contact with Mr. Winkler, in her opinion, would be a big setback. Not just a little setback, it would be a big setback. And we don't even know what that would be unless that happened. But based on what she has seen, this little girl, she believes that the problem is severe enough that she's having panic attacks, which is not typical of this particular situation, she indicated. So as a result of that, Your Honor, we believe that the exception that's set forth under the statute, which has also been recited in case law, which I believe I've set forth in my pleadings previously, but it's Rosick v. Rosick, 203 Mishap 193. It's 511 NW2D 693. It's a 1993 case. We believe, very clearly sets forth that, at this point, parenting time should not be given to Mr. Winkler due to the fact that any parenting time, we believe, in our opinion, would endanger the child's physical, mental, or emotional health. Of course, the court has not recited to the attorneys or the parties the results of the child interview, which is certainly, is typical in these situations. But we'd also ask that, in addition to taking into consideration the pleadings of the parties, the testimony from the prior hearing back in December of 2020, and the result of the court's interview with the minor child, we would ask that the court deny the motion that was filed by Mr. Winkler and particular case. And going back to my other, to my motion, allow this matter to proceed on the termination grounds under the step-parent adoption code.
Mr. Miller, I believe I do have the site, but would you repeat the site regarding the case? I think you said Rosa.
Yeah, so it's Rozek v. Rozek, Judge. That's ROZEK. And the site is 203 Mishap 193. And that's 511 NW2D 693. That's a 1993 Court of Appeals case.
All right, thank you. Now, Ms. Payne, it's your motion, so any final words for the court to consider?
Yes, just briefly, Your Honor. There is no evidence whatsoever, only speculation, that Leah will be harmed in any way by her father. But I'll tell the court this. If the way Mr. Miller has described Mr. Winkler and his history is what's been relayed to Leah, no wonder she's anxious. We're talking about criminal allegations when Mr. Winkler is still a teenager from almost 20 years ago. He's taken all the necessary steps and moved with caution to avoid disrupting her lifestyle, to avoid causing her anxiety. That meant not filing motions immediately. That meant reaching out to her mother. That meant taking a step to the parole board and doing things the right way. So I would be very concerned about anything that she relays about her knowledge of her father's criminal history or what her mother or someone else has told her, because if it's what Mr. Miller has said, I'm not surprised that she's anxious. Interestingly, though, her therapist said that it's very much in line, a little bit more than average for children who are in foster care or youth going through the family court system, and that she's actually done better with these coping skills that have been given to her. At the end of the day, the statute presumes there's a relationship between a parent and a child, and that's where we need to start. Speculation about what might happen in the future is not a basis to deny that contact. We want to go through the steps and try, and that's why we're here today.
Thank you. Well, at this point, I've heard the testimony on both matters before the court and have heard the closing arguments by the attorneys as well. And not addressing the step-parent adoption file at this point. What I'm going to do is take all of the testimony that's been previously received and this testimony today on this case, consider it, review it. I will likely give a written opinion. If I do not do that, I'll schedule a time when I can give a verbal opinion. But I think at this point, it's prudent on the court to give every due consideration that's appropriate to both sides, to look at the information presented carefully and based on that, render a decision. And it's my thought at this point in time that I'm going to do that in writing so the parties have an opinion from the court as well as an order. And I'll address the motions before the court. And depending on the decision made by the court, I'll also likely give some direction as to what steps to take, if any, with respect to the other case, the step-parent adoption case. So I'll, in essence, just for the benefit of both Samantha and Christopher, in essence, what I'm going to do is take the matter under advisement, render a written opinion, and enter an order. And then as soon as that's finished, I'll send that to the attorneys. They'll forward it to you, and then we'll proceed from there. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Anything further by the attorneys before we go off the record?
No, Your Honor.
I don't think so, Judge.
All right. I want to thank all of you for being available to the court by Zoom. I appreciate it. And at this time, we're going to sign off and go off the record. Thank you again.
Thanks, Judge.
Thank you.